Welcome back to Seat Time, and for the April episode of the Seat Time podcast, we are talking with Andrew Short. Not only did he have a very interesting injury that he's recovering from, but he is now a new Moto Dad because his son Hudson is riding and racing a lot more. We talk about all of his off-road endeavors and, of course, the 350 and how he was forced to race it by KTM. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. If you want to support Seat Time, the number one way to do that is to hit the share button, send it to all of your riding buddies, especially when you're driving to the trailhead. If you want to support us, there are many ways to do that financially in the description with links below. Hope you guys enjoy this episode. Mr. Andrew Short, unfortunately, I think this might be your first time on Seat Time, so I have to ask, how the heck are you doing, kind sir?
It's been rough lately. I had a bad accident, on the bike, and in motocross and supercross, you kind of get used to getting hurt. And then I did a lot of rally, and at the end there, I was like, I knew I was kind of playing with fire. I was so scared of getting hurt, or I saw some bad stuff happen. And once I stopped that, I started riding a lot of motocross with my kid. And I wasn't doing anything crazy, nothing like, I wasn't doing some big rhythm section or jumping some big jump and just going down the start straight. I was definitely pushing it, going fast in that aspect, but I lost the front and hit the deck. When I did, I knocked the wind out of myself pretty bad. But as I got up, I knew something wasn't right. And once I got to the hospital, I realized I broke. I think it was 7, 8, 9, but I'm fused from 6 to 10, something like that. Or maybe even broke 6 and 10. I don't know. It's wasn't great, but super thankful to be walking and not in a chair. And I've seen a lot of friends go through all that. So the last 6, 7 weeks have been really tough, difficult. It's kind of flown by, but that's currently kind of where I'm at.
Right. You just mentioned the fusing of a certain vertebrae. Is that something that happened because of this, or were those fused previous to this accident?
No, yeah, I'd been very fortunate never to have a back injury like that, and so yeah, it was completely fresh. And even when I got up, I wasn't thinking I had a broken back. I thought I had like internal bleeding or something, like I was bleeding out because it was warm and my stomach was all cramped, and it was a strange feeling, something I'd never felt before.
Right.
If I would have known it was my back, I would have obviously laid down and waited for the helicopter or an ambulance to transport me. But one of the Moto Dads there took me to the hospital. I was super thankful for that. And we were driving down the road. I'm like, I can't breathe. And he was going super slow, like trying to be nice. I'm like, you got to go faster.
Yeah.
And so he took me to the good hospital and everything went amazing. So a lot of silver linings in that. And never expected that when I was done like racing and doing all that craziness that this is what would happen. But that's sometimes how dirt bikes are.
Yeah, man, that is for sure. Okay, so kind of you've got some fusion going on now, but then too, from what it sounds like, there's still some nerve damage. Probably what we were just talking about, like there's tons of strength to still build back up now. Is that musculature damage, or is that because of nerve damage, or yes, you know what I mean? Like where are we at with the I guess the actual damage and then the ability to come back from that?
Yeah, I don't know exactly if I'll be able to come back, and it's still early and a lot going on, but there's definitely a lot of nerve damage. A lot went on. My back got put together kind of crooked because when they'd straighten me out, I'd lose feeling, and so it wasn't great. But in saying that, I'm really thankful to not be in a chair and still be able to walk and be pretty active. Today I was working on my kid's bike, and these things like this I always took for granted, and now after this, I'm like, whew. That could have been much worse. And so lots to be thankful for. I don't know if I'll be able to really ride. Obviously, I probably can't ride motocross anymore like I was. I love trail riding. Like that's my favorite thing to do. So I think this sounds really selfish and not maybe the best thing to say publicly, but I don't really care. Like I'm at peace if something happened with me if I went trail riding in the mountains, because to me that's living, and I don't want to just sit in a chair or kind of like right now I'm super depressed because I can't move or I can't do anything that I love, but that gives me something to look forward to. I really that's my goal, is to get back to the place where I can at least trail ride and enjoy the mountains and have fun in that aspect. But before this happened, I don't really have a whole lot going on in life, but I was riding like 4 or 5 times a week at least, with my kid especially. And I was riding a lot and not very structured, just for fun. And I love that because for so long, riding was very structured and very goal oriented. I still, especially when I switched to off road after motocross, supercross, it was all about kind of fun and less serious, but it was just different. But when all that racing, like when I wasn't getting paid to race, it was definitely just all about having fun. So I was riding quite a bit, and now it's been a big shock to the system, a lot of fresh things going on, and I don't know what's exactly going to happen.
Yeah. Man, that's such an interesting place to be right now, I think, for you, because what you thought was your future, right? Like potentially is no longer that future, but you've already started to have that mindset shift of like, you know what though? That's okay, because really what I want is I just want to be able to ride my dirt bike in the trails, in the woods, in those mountains, and just kind of feel that freedom of riding a dirt bike, right? And like the places that it could take you versus maybe like just doing laps on a motocross track. I mean, that's what I got out of that. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, but that same
In
happiness
a
is like,
good way, in a good way,
yeah,
not in a bad way.
yeah, but that same happiness and flow like that you get when you go trail riding, I get the same thing on a moto track, or like if we go race off road and with my kid, that's what's special. Like I was really not burnt out on moto, but I did a lot of it, and I've been to all the tracks, I've been to all the like I lived that dream, if that makes sense. So
Right.
that's why off road was so fun. But now that my kid rides moto and he's into it, there was a new appeal to it. So that's why I like that. But I definitely love trail riding and I don't know, that off-road aspect, just finding the flow and the adventure aspect and all that. So, but yeah, if you, I guess you understand, but at the same time, it's different because my kid likes moto now.
Yeah. It's like, dang it, it was awesome when he was just riding in the field. You know, no jumps, no nothing. But now it's like, oh, we're going back to the track. This is what's going to
Yeah.
happen. Did you, was there ever an inkling that you were going to be a moto dad?
No. And especially my son, he had some eye issues early
Oh, that's
on,
right. Yeah,
so he
yeah.
can't really see out of one eye very good. So depth perception was different, or difficult for him, but definitely different than other kids. And he loved hunting, fishing, and being outdoors. And all this kind of shifted with some other things that happened in our family a couple of years ago. So when that kind of pivoted, he went full in on moto. So when that happened, obviously I embraced it, and it was really cool for me just to ride with him and share that passion.
That's so
I
cool.
never
What?
expected.
Yeah. Um, it's kind of interesting. Have you seen a shift in Hudson because of it? Because of maybe this is a drive, right? In the sense that it's like this is kind of new for him, a new passion, something that he's maybe driven for by himself. That you're now being able to do that, and I'm just wondering from that father to son perspective, if you're starting to see kind of a shift in your son because of it. And again,
Yeah, I mean,
positive, negative. I'm not trying to say anything one way or the other.
yeah, it's like everything, like you said, it's addicting though. And once you catch that moto bug, it's like lights out on everything else. So I don't know. I feel like sometimes he gets too serious. Like now he wants to like dig in and go all out. And some of these kids, they've been riding since they were 4 or 5 years old, and 4 or 5 times a week, and they have a massive base and they've come a long way. And you can't just, in 1 or 2 years, overnight or over 1 year, just be at the top of your game. So I sense some frustration from him because he wants to do so much and it wants to accomplish something really quick, but these aren't things that happen overnight. And so I always try, like, dude, we're doing this for fun, and why are you so serious? And like, like, I don't know. Sometimes he gets bummed out. That's right. I feel like he loses perspective on that, and that's what's kind of cool about off road. I feel like, especially enduro, because you're not competing against 20 other dudes on the gate, and that's what I loved
Just the
about it.
clock.
Because so long I
Yeah.
always did that. It's just about you and being the best that you can be. And when you're done, you're like, oh, I could have done this better or that better. But at the same time, what's cool about motocross is you line up with 20 other dudes or 40 in motocross, and you know who the winner is. It's like pretty clear. You all went off the same gate and you got to the finish line first. And there's something about that that's special too. So both are unique, but I definitely wanted to push my kid more towards off road just because the vibe, and I feel like it's a cool atmosphere to be in, and you get to expose yourself to different challenges, and you have to overcome a lot. And I think for me, I definitely enjoy that aspect more now.
That's cool. Um, do you find that y'all are starting to have a
good father-son kind of like coach-rider relationship, or does that you said, that it's hard for him to kind of see that perspective, that it's like we really need to grow right now and just have some consistency. But does it mean, now granted he's young too, so just in general that's hard to kind of like grasp that perspective, but do you feel that he respects you in the sense of a coach, or does he feel like you're talking to him as your dad, as his dad?
Yeah, no, I'm just dad to him. So
Yeah, okay.
sometimes he acts like I'm stupid, and I'm like, bro, I'm really one dimensional. Like we were talking about earlier, you're like, oh, what's next? All this thing. Like for me, it's kind of sad, but I really just know moto, and that's my passion, and I care about it. So when I tell him something, I'm like, dude, you really need to do this, or let's try to like go a little more this direction. He's like, no, 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 we got to do this, or I need a mod 85, and I'm like, dude, you're not even riding your 85 like to like there's so much more in it, and let's keep reliability and all these things. Like, no, we need this and this, and this kid has this. I'm like, no, pump your brakes, like. So some things like this in these situations, it frustrates me because he acts like I'm not very intelligent with this, and I'm like, I know, it's like the one thing in life I know. So
Yeah.
it's funny because I am just dad, and he doesn't. I think sometimes he doesn't grasp, that I've been riding dirt bikes for a long time. But other times, and I think he sees the other side of it, where he can really lean on it or it clicks. And I get frustrated because he has come a long way in a small amount of time. And I try to tell him that, but he always wants more. As a racer, you get greedy and you want more, more, and more. And that's a dangerous situation when you do get greedy, because you push yourself too far sometimes, and it can put you in a bad spot. So for me as a father, that kind of worries me also.
I can understand that, man. Yeah, it's funny. So we missed you at Sandwinder this year, that's for sure. I finally make it back, and you're not there, and understandably, right, that you couldn't come on out. But I had my son with me, Liam, and he's 10. He'll be 11 later on this summer. He's still on a 65. He's too big for it, but he's riding. You know what I mean? That's a good enough for me. But it's so funny because I'm like, Liam, you need to stop dumping the clutch. Liam, stand up just a little bit more. And it's like all these little things. Again, totally ignores me. And I'm not an Andrew Short, but I at least have some knowledge, right? A base to kind of like help him. So again, completely ignores me. But then I realize his little buddy that he's riding with, Paulo, starts telling him all the same things, and he's listening. And I was like, huh. So then anytime Paulo came up and was like, hey, man, he needs to do this more, like telling me, I was like, you need to tell him. Because every time you tell him, he listens. He doesn't listen to me because, again, I'm dad, to your point, right? Exactly what you said.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something there, right, where it's like, call Seiji, or text Seiji and have Seiji like call Hudson or whatever, and like it's now the, you know what I mean, like that way you can play telephone with the advice, so you could still kind of be coach, but it's not as direct because they just don't have that perspective, and for some reason, we're dad, and that's okay, that's great. It's just hard when we want to impart our knowledge. It's like I've done this for 40 of my 43 years, like and like I've built up a knowledge base, and I want to help you just skip 10 years of learning here. And it's like, no, dad, like you don't know what you're talking about. But it's so tough, man.
I get it. And like we have this one dude that rides with us, Plumber Doug. And Plumber Doug, him and Hudson like rip around on the farm here together. And Doug will say, oh yeah, Hudson's so good at coaching because he's telling me to do this, this, and this. So I know Hudson's listening because then he'll repeat it to Plumber Doug. I'm like, okay, so at least he heard, But it's funny because I'll catch him in those situations. But I don't know. The other thing is too, it's like I analyze riding and trying to find those small increments here and there for so long that I just want him to ride and have fun. I don't want to be like over there like, oh, you need to weight the outside foot peg and look ahead and get all Moto Dad on him. I'm like the exact opposite. I want him to be internally motivated, not externally motivated, if that makes sense. I want him to ride because he wants to ride, and I don't want to push him and all these things. So I'm pretty relaxed on a lot of this stuff. So I don't really say too much, or if I do, I just ask questions like, oh, so what went good? Or, how did you feel in this situation? And I could probably push him a little more, and maybe that's good. And I think for me, that's a negative because I feel like maybe I was pushed a lot, or I had a lot of that external noise for so long that it was difficult for me in some situations. So I'm maybe the opposite, with my own kid now.
Right. Well, there's definitely other racers, other riders listening right now, and you have a career full of built up knowledge, right? So like we're kind of going through this and like what are those nuggets that you've taken away from this? If we were to truly step back and distance ourselves from what you just said, from oh, I got to weight the foot peg, oh, I got to look forward more, like what are the real things that we could be working on to move us forward on the motorcycle?
It's not just one thing or a few things. It's a lifestyle like anything. And I always tell my son, I feel like if you want it bad enough, you'll figure it out. And I think observing people is the biggest key. For me, I was a visual learner, and just even going to enduro, like I heard you talking with Zach, and he was asking questions to his teammates. But there's so much to go into the track and watching some of the older guys or people with experience, and just visually seeing how they prepare, what tires they have on their bike, what brake pads, little things like this that maybe doesn't matter. But then also asking mechanics, hey, what type of fluid are you guys using? What is in your bum bag? Like Zach was saying, whether he's using a bum bag or the Camelback over the shoulder, right? And what mix. And I think visually, like for me, for motocross, I learned so much by watching David Pingree when he was an older guy. Little things, how much food he'd bring to the race, or even to practice at the track. And he'd get there early, water the track. He would shovel. Afterwards, he would shovel the track and just fix it up for the next days, just so he'd actually practice starts. He wouldn't just do 3 or 4. He would do 5 in the morning and 5 in the afternoon. It was like little things like this, and you piece it all together. And stretching and training. He was the first one who got me a road bicycle and took me riding. And it's not going to happen overnight. But I think if you are internally motivated, like what we said, you'll figure it out. And there's so many people that they're hot or not. At like one point they're super motivated, and for a month or two they're on it, right? And then you won't see them for 3 or 4 months. And then the people that are always there and they're consistent, they have that gradual growth, and it's not like the learning curve isn't too steep. I feel like these are the people that they make the biggest gains and maybe have the most fun. But I think it's a lifestyle. I think there's very few people who can just hop in and send it and be okay and be fast and see those moments or times, like you were saying, that made it click. Like what's one thing I could do? I think first you got to start with the fundamentals, and you got to build a big base and then gradually just grow. But there's so many different things, and understanding your bike and how to work on it, and all the little settings that I think can make a bigger difference than you think. And you were tripping out about Zach and bringing motocross, supercross stuff to off-road with torque specs and analyzing these small details that would be considered an off-road. Like most people would shake their head and don't think it's going to make a big difference, but those things do add up, especially in motocross and supercross, and everybody else is doing it. So I think those things do matter, and it keeps the bikes consistent. I think Zach, if his bike will feel similar from the practice bike to the race bike, that's one less thing he has to adjust to on race day. He can hop in on the track and then can adjust quicker. And if he does make changes, he knows it's not just something from that bike. He knows what the base is supposed to feel like. So I think there's a few things like that off-road could be maybe a little more on top of, but those guys also know what they're doing, and everybody's so specialized these days. It's hard to be well-rounded like back in the day.
Yeah. I don't know if you would have done this during your racing career, but maybe you know more about it now. Like I wear a Whoop, right? For my metrics, right? And that started because of psoriatic arthritis, but it's been a phenomenal tool, as well as I have gotten more into training, more into nutrition and things like that. Now there's other things out there like levels, right? So you can have a glucose monitor at all times. You can figure out what foods are going to, spike your insulin versus high glycemic index if you want to get nerdy, right? But have you ever really gone down that rabbit hole of we're talking about torque specs and things like that, but things like a whoop, things like levels are that torque specs for the body, right? That fine tuning. And I was wondering if you've ever played with anything like that. And if you haven't or had, like, why it does not feel like it's more prominent in our sport since our sport is so physically demanding.
Yeah, I think there's massive benefits to this, but once you start giving all that stuff power, I think you can go down the rabbit hole, like what you said. And there's that's what's cool about our sport too. It's not just about the bike, and the rider makes the biggest difference. And so when I raced motocross and supercross, for sure, I feel like every detail was analyzed, and there was a whole group around me from the bike and technical side and the physical side that was on top of this. I think that's also why I got so burnt out kind of at the end also, because I tried to maximize everything, and I equated results to effort instead of technique. And so I thought the more effort I'd put into it, the better my results would be. And I would just more. And I kind of fell into that trap by trying to microanalyze everything, I guess. And once I switched to off-road, I was a little more loose, and my mindset was a lot different. And I feel like you have to have a good balance with anything. So I think once like you mentioned, all those tools, I think they are really useful, and you can learn a lot from them, but you have to listen to your body and you have to be human too. Like, I think you're human first and be a racer second. So if you can learn something from those tools and it'll help you on race day, great. But at the same time, if you overanalyze all that stuff and you show up on race day and your whoop strap says you didn't get any rest, or you're not in a good spot, how are you going to have race day performance if you're already in a hole before you even line up for a 3-hour race? I think sometimes that stuff can play mind games with you. So I think there is something to learn from it, but I would suggest to the local racer, just keep balance, and don't do anything crazy on race day. Do what you do during the week. Don't change everything on race day. Same with your bike, ride your bike a little bit before you get there, and don't change anything before race day. Just keep it maintained. That's what I would suggest, because if you're paid to race, I think you have all those people and you can do that, and you have to take it seriously. But sometimes you give it, like for me, I just give it too much power, and sometimes it would mess with my head.
Yeah. See, it's interesting because I kind of take again, I've been wearing my whoop now like 3.5 years. And so there's days that I wake up and I'm in the red and I'm like 29%. And I'm like, that's like your recovery score, right? For those maybe who don't know, like if it's a 29%, that's pretty damn low, right? And that's based off of your heart rate variability, things like that. So physiologically, your body is not primed to do shit, is what the whoop is telling you. But here's what you do. You go, okay, that is happening. I don't have control over that. What do I have control over? Well, now I need to make sure I eat the breakfast I was planning to eat. I need to make sure that I get my mobility in. I need to make sure I'm properly hydrated, right? I need to make sure that when I go to the line, I do my breathing techniques, because that's now out of your control. You woke up and your body physically is in whatever state it's in. And I think that's where mental toughness is such a weird thing, but I think at least coming into the right mindset of realizing to not let those little things like that build up to where it now creates a wall, and it's something else you have to crawl over to kind of like even feel like the day's worth living. Because I think a lot of people can do that. They wake up and whether it's a whoop or I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, or I got a case of the Mondays. It's like, well, maybe, but also there's all this other shit that's probably you could really focus on because you actually have control over those. And boy, by the end of the day, you're like, man, that was a damn good day. Or maybe I just won my race, right? If we kind of shift our perspective. Ooh, there's the perspective word again. I like it.
But do you really need a whoop strap to know that? I feel like if you want to maximize your day, you only have 100 points in the day, right? And if you're going to spend 20 points analyzing all that stuff, you could spend that like, making that food, stretching, like you said, getting your mind play. Like, I feel like once you start giving that stuff energy, for me, what I learned is you only have so much to go around. And pretty soon, that's why I feel like I got burned out, because I was trying to do all this stuff. So I understand what you're saying. I think it's great to learn. I have a friend who was in a super high pressure job for a long time, and he really analyzed all this. And it's crazy, now that he's not doing this job just for the last few weeks, how much his life has changed and how much more he can sleep and recover and pay all that stuff back. Like what you said, if you're you're in a hole and you have to perform, and race day you have to dig deep. A lot of us, it's like we get home and we just like go back to normal or whatever, and you never pay all that back, and it just is a bad cycle. So
I love it
for that,
because you said the word balance, and that's
yeah,
what makes me think about that is it's like what can you add or what do you need to take away to find your balance, and that's where it's really weird and where a lot of people I think miss on that today is if you go to YouTube, you go to podcasts, you go to this stuff, it's all about hacks. What's your morning hack? What's
yeah,
your nighttime routine hack? What's your hack? Bro, you can't do anything 110% for a month and expect to be able to keep it up, right? Because that's out of balance. It's out of whack. Like you're just giving all this energy, I like your word there, to this one thing. But you know what happens? Everything else gets no energy, right? But if you
yeah,
kind of say, okay, I don't have the energy or the ability to give to this morning routine, this morning hack, but I like the idea of stretching right when I wake up or having a glass of water right when you know what I mean? And it's like slowly add some stuff in, see how it
yeah,
feels, and all of a sudden now it's normal. And it's part of the routine and the balance. It comes into that consistency and feels so much more normal than like I think what you said, where you're just like trying to hammer for a month and then it just fades off because you realize it's just not something that you can consistently keep up. But I love the
yeah.
word energy you use there and how you talk about it.
Hey, but I don't really have any regrets from racing. But if I do, if I was to go back and do it again, I would definitely, like we said, balance. I would take out a lot of those big rides that I would do on my road bike. Like there's no reason why I need to be riding 100 miles or a 50-mile ride on a Wednesday before the race. And I would care more about race day performance. I valued so many days at the test track or the practice track, but none of those things, no one remembers that. Only I do, right? And I didn't get any points from those days. And so I think if you're a normal dude, you have to figure out, okay, how can I be at my best on Sunday or Saturday or that enduro, right? So you have a goal or a motocross race. Like my kid, he just went to the spring nationals. You have to build up to that. You have to stay consistent. You have to take care of your body. You have to be in the right mindset before you get there, and you have to control all that with balance. So I think if there's one area, not that I have a regret, but that I would focus on is trying to keep more of that balance, but not giving so much energy or power, like what we were talking about, to all these things and just solely concentrating on race day performance. I think there's so much there. And if there was people that were much less fit than me, that did a lot less laps at the practice track, that didn't know their bike as well as me, but still could smoke me on race day, right? Maybe they were a little mentally stronger, or maybe they just didn't care as much, and they just rode their bike and they found the flow. I think there was a lot more to this when I raced than I completely understood. So if I could do it again, that's where I would definitely spend some more time and energy focusing on these aspects.
Hell yeah, man. I love it. That's a good discussion. I appreciate you sharing all of that. When Ryan Sipes was on earlier this year, he talked about how off-road has just so many more variables, right? And when he started training with Steve Hatch and doing a little bit more off-road training, that he felt he became a better motocross and supercross racer because of the fact that in that world, the motocross, supercross, everything just feels so perfect, and that they're trying to make the track so perfect, the practice pass so perfect, and the lap time so specific and things like that, that when he felt that when he started doing a little bit more off-road racing and training, that it made him better overall. And I wanted to know what your thoughts were on that. Like, you've done a ton of off-road racing as well and kind of come back into racing motocross and supercross a little bit within that. I didn't know if you had a perspective there on how you feel about that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that, and he's spot on. At the same time, everything's so specialized now. I feel like Cody Webb can't go to GNCC and crush it, right? Or I feel like a desert rider can't go ride an enduro. I feel like you're either good at one thing or another. And same with motocross and supercross. You hear those guys that are in supercross right now, they're all going to go start riding and testing for motocross. When they hop back to supercross to finish the season, their corner speed's going to be better. They can roll better. Like you said, they can read the track better because they're used to bumps and ruts again, and not the smooth, perfect supercross track. So I think there is a lot of importance to this, and recognizing that you have to be a little more well-rounded, but you still have to be at the tip top of the spear of whatever you're trying to specialize at. I think you can't lose focus of that, and to be the best anyway. If you're just worried about having fun, then I think you should do a little bit of everything, because that's what's fun about being on dirt bikes. But if you're Eli Tomac for Supercross, obviously he's smart enough to understand the fundamentals and the skills, and to recognize when to practice that and when to bring that in for his Supercross training. But I think for off-road guys or a Supercross guy to go do like GNCC or enduro, it might be fun. It might like open up their mindset of dirt bikes and just strategy on how they race, and might just bring a fresh breath of air to them. But I don't think it's technically going to help them on Saturday night to do 20 laps fast, or to read the track or read the terrain, right? It's kind of like golf, right? No matter what motorsport you do in the dirt, you have to read the green, right? And the slant, and how you read that and interpret that. That's how you know that's what separates everyone. Like I heard Zach talking about in the podcast earlier, how he had to get out of the grass because the grass was wet, and as a moto guy, he never had to understand that or to read the greens like that. Makes sense from the golf analogy. So he had to have a different mindset on how he approached racing. And it's the same for me, like I raced motocross and supercross forever, and then I went to go desert race and all these crazy places, and I never knew what the wind would do to sand dunes, or if it rained, if it's hard and crusty, or all these little things, these little variables made a big difference in terms of how the race was going to unfold. And as a motocross supercross racer, you would always just try to get the checkered flag. There was no strategy really, like you kind of knew where all the cards were at. And desert racing with rally, the starting position was huge, right? And where you're going to be and what type of terrain was the next day. And you're always looking for the long road and where that will put you at the finish. So it was just, I think as a racer, you have to be able to read the greens. And that's what I'm always telling my kid. It's like, you have to understand the jump face and where it's going to be low. Or if you're an enduro rider, how big the course is, how, if you can save energy, like what you were talking about, by getting outside the line. It might be a little slower, but over 3 hours, it's going to be a lot faster, right? So trying to open up your mind to these things, I think is huge. And sometimes you need someone to kind of point and help you find that direction, but it's not always easy. But that's what makes it fun and addicting, because when you cross the finish, you're like, I could have done that better and this better. Next time I'm going to do this, or I'm going to get this rain jacket. I saw this guy do this. And if I can stay warmer, I'll save this energy and be that much better. There's always something to it.
Yeah. My wife thinks that I overthink it. Like whenever I come back from an event and I'm already like, man, I was like this. And she's, why are you overthinking it? I was like, I'm not overthinking it. Like, this is the best part, because now, like, I have all these little things I can work on. And if I get even 0.5% better just because I visualized it, right? Like, boom, now I get to go practice it. Like, that's again, I completely agree. Like, I love it. I love it. And it's even better when you have somebody in the car with you, or the van or whatever, on the ride home, because then you're both just like bench racing and just like, oh my dad, like hit a tree and whoosh, like, I mean, it just takes it up a whole nother notch.
Yeah, I'm with you.
You and Hudson are gonna have some good times doing that. On a professional level, like, seriously, how is rally? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that seems like it's probably the scariest thing in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't understand how dangerous it was when I first started. And maybe dangerous is the wrong word, because I think just motorsports in general, but the speeds are so high, and at times, especially Dakar, the speeds are really high and there's a lot on the line. So people take big risks. And if you don't take that risk, you're not going to be competitive. And that's the scary but bad part. But it's super fun. It's the best, because like we were just talking about, there's so much that goes into it. And it's not just about speed, it's strategy, and you have to be smart, and reading the road book, navigating. It's an addiction that's it's off the deep end. But another negative is it costs so much money, and it's like it's not something that everyone can just go do. It takes a lot for it to all come together. Or if you're fortunate to have a ride, and there's very few of these, to get the opportunity to do it, it's the best, I think. It's really cool, and it's like MotoGP, Supercross, and Offroad, combined into one thing. It's really cool. It's special for sure.
I love it. I got a chance to do the Baja Rally in 2014, and I did a little bit of training there in Pahrump with some of the ICO guys and stuff like that. And man, I loved it. I loved it. I was like, it really was like anybody that wants timekeeping enduros to still be a thing, you need to be a rally racer now. Like that's like it, because it's that on steroids. Like you want to overthink everything, that's the sport to go do it. And then to your point, like not only because you don't get to overthink the terrain because you're thinking about everything that's going on your handlebars. You're just like, well, I'm gonna point it in that direction, and hopefully I'm got myself in the right position that I don't die because it's just nuts. I had a lot of fun.
It's not something you can just touch on though either. Like what you said, just to go do it once like that, it's like cool, but to find like the rhythm or flow and like have everything click to where it's like, oh, this is sweet. You have to do it all the time. It's so specialized, and I don't know, it's crazy. And that's why it's so hard to do for normal people, and just even to build a road book and to have the resources and the bike and the terrain, all that stuff. It's too much, but when it all comes together and you can continuously do it, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I just can't believe I just did the math on that. That was 9 years ago, Andrew Short. Like that sucks.
But it still stuck with you, right?
Oh, dude. Oh my, it was phenomenal. And then I got to do the Rip to Cabo in 2015. Like I got to ride Baja 2 years in a row, and I haven't been back since. But it's just like that place still sticks with me. Like I get it. I understand why that place is so special to people. I mean, it's just it's a whole nother world. A different type of riding. The people are just so laid back. It's such a cool place to go and play and stuff like that. Like, man, yeah, I'd love to get back and go do more of that. But life. Here we are on the internet.
Yeah. Anyway. I don't know if Baja is the place to race anymore, but to go down there and ride on a dirt bike, I still think is pretty special. And the Sonora Rally is coming up in Mexico as well. That's in mainland, and this is the first year it's part of the World Championship for Rally, which is a really big deal to have a race like that here in North America so close, and to be a part of the World Championship is pretty cool. It's massive for the sport and for everyone involved.
How does the Mexican mainland differ from the Baja Peninsula?
It's completely different, just because I think Baja is so entrenched with the actual score series, and basically it seems like that's more of a car race now than anything. It's so rough and tore up, and I did it in a side-by-side with one of my friends last year, and it looked like zero fun on a dirt bike, to be truthful. And the Sonora Rally is amazing. It's full of I forget the name of the dunes that are there, but it starts with a G, I think. But the dunes are massive for a long ways, has really cool terrain, and it's so remote that the roads are really faint, so you have to be really good on navigation. And it's just epic place. They have cool bivouacs or the pits, it's next to the ocean, and it just has a cool vibe. It's a lot different than Baja, and it's a lot smoother as well. So I think from the motorcycle aspect, it's a lot more enjoyable when it's just not all whooped out and full of rocks and ruts going everywhere.
Right. Well, if I run into an extra 20 grand, I'll sign up.
Yeah. Oh, I don't even know if we can do it for 20 grand now. They have a national class, which is cool to try to keep it entry level, but it takes big money to go do these races.
Yeah, well, we're talking my level too, buddy. We're just gonna find a clapped out old 450. You're gonna throw a big tank on it, get one of the, you know what I'm saying? Like Moto Mine is gonna have
tower.
We're gonna tower, buddy. Back in the day, we'll make it work.
Yeah.
Well, the transition to being in a car, right? Racing rallies, like how did that happen? How did that come about?
I don't
know. Is that the right word in a car? I don't. 4 wheels on 4 wheels.
It's a side-by-side UTV. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, just because I'm friends with everybody in the bivouac, and for me, when I stopped racing, I wanted to go hang out and see all my friends. It was a cool way. I love the navigation aspect also. It's completely different in a car because obviously the bikes go first at these races.
Mm.
And then I think there's like a Dakar, there's 120 bikes that go. And then the first car starts and there's lots of cars. And so by the time I was there in the UTV, it was like there was a road, there was some navigation, but it was just correcting somebody else's mistake. So it wasn't like the bike, it was a completely different race. But it's still fun nevertheless. And the bivouac is a really special place with all the people, and it's full of passion and just gearheads that love and want to be the best. And those are the people I want to be around. So I really enjoy that. I don't know if I can do it now with my back. It seems like most people that roll a car or miss a dune, it seems like the first thing that breaks in a car for the driver or the co-driver is their back. So I'm not sure where that's going to put me, but like I said, rally is the best. Even if you're in a car, it's really fun. Dirt bikes
That's
are much
awesome.
better.
Yeah, I have always liked the idea of racing UTVs, but the couple times that I've even like played around in them, like just goofing off, but like trying to go fast, something always breaks. And I'm
Yeah,
like, so you automatically buy this thing off the showroom floor that you have to replace almost everything, right? Like to go be able to just go fast and not trash everything. So that already like, okay, well that puts me out of that sport because at that point I
yeah,
might as well go spend 20 grand and do the Sonora Rally, right? Like, so
yeah. No, I think I'm with you. Dirt bikes are the best, but the cars are probably the next best. It's like moto and a cage basically with those UTVs. So yeah,
I
if we
like
win
it.
the lottery, we'll go start a team, me and you.
I like it. Are you still down in the Smithville area?
Yeah, we're outside
Nice.
Austin, so
Good news is I'm still in McKinney, so I mean, a quick 4-hour drive, and we can be collaborating on all of this stuff.
yeah.
So bikes. You have ridden a lot of different bikes throughout your years, and I think we hear a lot of talk about aluminum frame, steel frame and stuff like that. Like, I just kind of wanted to know, like, what is that switch like for a professional racer, right? Like us, weekend warriors, like local racers and things like that. We just buy what we buy. We like it. We may do some suspension on it. We're going to go have fun. We're probably going to enjoy it regardless of it feeling weird. But I figure for you guys, there's a lot of fine tuning that goes into setting up your motorcycle. And it seems like an aluminum frame to a steel frame, right? Everything could be vastly different. And I kind of want to know what your thoughts are on that. Like, how did those transitions go for you?
Yeah, I think the difference between aluminum frame or a Japanese bike compared to the Austrian bikes with the steel frame is massive difference. I think for the general consumer, maybe not a big difference if they're not so picky or sensitive. But for a rider that's familiar with their machine, they ride all the time, it's a big difference. And I think just the characteristic on how it reacts. Off-road, obviously, it's funny because the Austrians have been so dominant, but it seems like when I rode the Yamaha, it responded so much faster and easier, in and out of the tight stuff in the trees, and I still had a good feel. It wasn't overly harsh or anything like that. I really enjoyed the Yamahas when I rode them for off-road, but in the desert or work style, when you're going across the square edge, I feel like that's where the KTM or Husky gas. This is where something like that really works well, especially if you can get the front end a little further out than the motocross setup. Man, I think those bikes handle really good, and I'm sure they do the same. But nowadays, all these kids that are doing so well in GNCCs, I think they grew up on KTM 85s, or even they come up on 50s, 60s on KTMs now, that they're so used to how those bikes feel that for them to get on a Japanese bike is even worse. But for motocross and supercross, the aluminum frame reacts a lot different on the big hits when you're under a big load in the rhythm sections, when you're seat balancing something, going through the whoops, all this stuff. The bike it handles quite a bit different. So I don't know if the normal casual rider can feel this, but at the high level, when you see those guys like Christian Craig coming off the Yamaha back to the Husky, it's a big difference for those guys. Just the way that the chassis handles, but also I think the motors are a lot different. I don't feel like the KTMs are as connected, especially on the on-offs and coming out of the turns, and the way the gearbox is. Where on some of the Japanese bikes, they have different transmissions where you can use first gear a lot more. Where
Mm.
KTM, when you're coming out of the turn, I feel like sometimes their gearbox is little, maybe not as connected, and you have to roll a little bit more to get out of the turn. So situations like this, I definitely think they're a lot different. But if you spend enough time on any bike, you get it figured out, or you just change things. You know, I feel like at KTM at the end of my career, I was so used to a Honda, and we set the gearing up to be a little more connected, but then it was difficult to start, right? In second gear. So then that's when Michael Byrne was working with the team. Yeah, we could figure out the third gear start. And who knew that third gear would work so well? You know, as long as I could get out over the gate with those guys, when they went to go shift, I was gone, right? So situations like this, I feel like sometimes it might be a negative, but you just adapt and overcome, and you never know. You find out some other positives down the road that can help you. So I do think there's a bigger difference than people make it out to be. And I don't know, some people just gel with different bikes too. It's like, you know, some people like apples and the other people like oranges. I don't know.
Right. That's the exact same reference that Cole Kirkpatrick made today when we were talking about the
Yeah.
KTM and Turcos. I mean, he literally was like, it's like apples to oranges. And I said, well, technically, it's like oranges to blueberries because mine's a Sherco. And he giggled at that. So I was like, yeah, we'll go with it. But 450s in Supercross. I'm going to step back from that statement, but that's where we're headed.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, the 350 was developed, like put into production, or at least started being conceived of as an idea because that's where they thought they were headed, right? That the AMA or Feld or whoever was going to, air quotes, change the rules so that 450 four strokes couldn't be used anymore. And I'm using air quotes a lot because I'm using words that I'm speculating from research that I tried to piece together. And so that was the creation of the 350. Now, you, from what I understand, also were potentially forced to ride a 350 for a while for development purposes. I don't know if that's true, but like in the long run, I'm asking all these questions because I kind of want you to give us a little bit of that backstory of you on the 350, what you know about why it came into existence. It's very loved by a lot of people. And then why are we still on 450s? Like it seems like everybody agrees, everybody says it that we shouldn't be on them, but we are. Go.
I don't think everyone, I don't think 450s are too much. And I'll start with this. I own a KTM 350, but, and I love it. For what I do, it's amazing. To go ride on my farm is amazing. But when I rode them in 2011, I just came to KTM from factory Honda, and this was the foundation that KTM really believed in. They thought exactly kind of what you said, that a 450 was a bit much. This 350 was going to be revolutionary in ways that it'll be more rideable, it'll be lighter, and they thought it would be a great bike for racing, for not only just consumers, but racing at a high level. But in American Supercross, exactly all those areas I told you coming out of the bowl turns,
Yep.
where the Austrian bikes still, I feel like, don't have as much connection. This is where the 350 really lagged, especially coming off the Honda where it had long first gear, where you could basically just throw it down. You could jump the triple in first gear if you wanted to, but you could come out of a bull turn on that Honda in first gear and you could go 3 into any rhythm section, no problem, you know? And on that 350, couldn't use first gear with how it was. In second gear, I could barely make it up, and I had to be so precise and roll so fast to get up on there that there was no margin for error. Where with that Honda, it was really rideable. I could change direction. When the ruts did get deep, I could cut back under and still have enough speed to get under. Well, on the 350, this just wasn't possible because I needed to have such a round apex around the turn to keep my momentum to get on that rhythm, that when the track got rough, it was just really difficult for me. So for me personally, it didn't work very great. This is at the same time when Cairoli was winning everything in the GPs. So it's not to say that this bike, I think you could point the finger more at me maybe than the bike. And that's what's cool about our sport. We were talking about all these things that you need to do to be good, but in the end, it comes down to the rider. But if everyone made 350s, like what you're saying, all the manufacturers, they're all on board, and that was part of the regulations, I think this would be cool. But at the same time, I think the 450 is good because all these kids can go fast on a 250, but when you have a 450, you have to set the bike up really good. It separates the people who can really set up a bike right. Um, I think the weight transfer and the loads and all these things, you have to have more technique. You have to be more precise. And I think this is what separates the best riders in the world. And I think that's important because if everyone's on a 250, everyone's going to be sending it. Maybe it is better for the racing and saying that aspect. Maybe it'll keep everyone closer. But this year's Supercross season, the racing's been unbelievable. It's been the best it's ever been. And there's so much parity in the class. And, you see Chase Sexton losing the front, and he basically flipped over the front this weekend in Seattle.
Yep.
But, Jet Lawrence on the 250, he hardly makes any mistakes, and he can change direction and go wherever he wants because there's a lot less going on. There's a lot less inertia going on in that motor and that chassis. It's just not loading it the same way it does for Chase on that 450. So I think it's important that the manufacturers stay on these 450s. And I also think that the 350 maybe wasn't before its time, but it plays an important role for the consumers. But I don't think its place is for racing at a high level, especially in AMA Supercross. And KTM recognized it that year, I think. And if they wanted to get good riders like Ryan Dungey in 2012, they knew they had to make a 450. And he rode the 350, and I don't think he would have signed if that's what he had to ride. So I think that's why they made that 450, and that's how the factory edition came about, was that year, because I think it wasn't ready for development, so they had to make 400 of them, and that's how the factory edition came about. But I don't know. I really truly believe that it's a great bike, but just not for racing. You're putting yourself at a handicap, I think. Yeah. And I think that bike's a lot better now than what it was in 2011 as well.
Yeah, well, again, we're aging ourselves. That's like 12 years ago, so I hope so. I think what's interesting is, and you're right, we're seeing phenomenal racing. So now it's kind of like foot and mouth. But we're looking at stadiums, right, changing, and our access to stadiums potentially changing. And so we're starting to see more and more tracks deteriorate in a way where not only are the ruts getting almost unmanageable, and that's racing, right? Like that's just smart line choice and stuff like that. But when we're consistently seeing them dig down into whatever their base layer is or the floor, right? It's kind of like, okay, well it's like, okay, well now that's a problem. How do we do that? Do we get more dirt? Oh, well, more dirt's more expensive. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like and then the manufacturers are only trying to make the bikes faster, because if your bike's faster, you have a better chance of winning. And so what is the thing that starts to limit it to the point so much that it's like, we have to do something? And I'm not saying we're there right now by any means. I'm just kind of, it's the push and the pull of that I wonder if there's a chance where it's like, okay, we can only be in baseball stadiums now, which are a ton smaller. So everybody's making 300s or whatever that limiting factor turns into.
Yeah, I don't think the 450 has anything to do with the stadium size, though, and all that. And the end product is good. And I also think it's better for privateers and just the sport in general, because you can build a competitive 450 much easier and cheaper than building a competitive 250. Mm-hmm. The difference between Jet Lawrence, 250 and a privateer 250 is crazy. And if you want to build one that's pretty good and go to Jamie at Twisted, it's going to cost a lot of money, right?
Right.
So I think, you saw that with Savachi this year. He's a great rider. He didn't have the opportunity with a team, with a factory team, but he had a customer-built bike. He was in the top 10, nothing crazy on his bike, and he was competitive, I think he went to Pro Circuit or to Mitch and had a bike that was, was with the factory bikes. I don't think you can do that with a 250F. It would be really difficult. There's very few people. I think Club MX does this, but they spend a ton of money with Twisted. And I think it's important for the sport to have access to this. And I think that's what's great about this new Future series too. Obviously, you don't want to put these young kids on a 450, but the high-end elite people, they need to be on the 450. I think it's special. And I think if you get rid of this, it's going to dilute it. And it's not going to, I think the only benefit is the racing is going to be tight. But besides this, I don't see any other benefit. And the track's going to break down just as much if it's a 250 or 450. It might break down a little bit more with the 450s, but not that much. And the biggest difference in this is when they went to the 20-minute main events instead of the 20-lap main events. As soon as they did this, the tracks got way gnarlier. It was way more physical. And this is a time when Cooper Webb got a lot better as well, because he's clutch in these situations. He could cut down and adapt. And as long as he could hang at the beginning and sprint, he could crush those guys at the end. It's been that way the whole time. So I think a 250 or 450 isn't really going to change. And I think it isn't going to change the like Cooper winning or not winning, I think, but it's important that we stay with 450s. I truly believe for racing at a high level. Even in Europe, you see it,
Yeah. I love it. You've made some great points, and now I think they're all valid points. You know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, nope, you're right. You're still right. I like it. And
What
it's just
about
good conversation. Though? Man, see, I'm just a 300 two-stroke rider guy. Like, and it's like, because it keeps it fun. You know what I mean? Like, I keep going like, oh, do I want to go to 4-stroke again? It's like, if I ever committed to race a series, like go back and like, I'm going to do all a T-Sec, or I'm going to try to do all the national enduro, I'd get a 4-stroke, and I'd probably get a 250, or if I was getting a Sherco, I'd probably get a 300 4-stroke. Because I feel like I could just carry a little bit more speed, and in the long run, it's going to be a little bit more consistent over time. And the 2-stroke's going to wear me out just a little bit more, trying to keep it on the keeping it on the revs. But man, in the long run, I don't know. I think it's a really good question, because we saw Caleb Russell do so stinking good for so many years on that 350, but now we see Stuart Baylor and all those guys now kicking ass on 450s. And I wonder too if it ever comes back to the same idea of like worrying about the racing, worrying about the track, the deterioration, like environmental concerns that could potentially come into that kind of stuff, like landowners wanting their property less damaged. Again, I'm just like, there's so many things that like you're like, potentially this is something that, and so it's like, do you try to be forward thinking on that? Because it is better to be proactive than it is to be reactive, because then you're reacting, right? And you're trying to catch up at that point. So I'm not saying all of this in the sense that like this is happening. I'm kind of trying to think in the sense of like, okay, what could we potentially start doing now to think about what could be coming down the pipeline? And that's another thing too with electric motorcycles. It's like everybody's so negative. I'm like, if we really give this a thought, we might be all riding these in 10 years. I don't want that. I don't think that's going to happen. But if we have that mindset for just a little bit, we start to view it just a tad bit different. And the vantage point of it is kind of like, okay, well then if that's the case, in 10 years, we're all on these, what does racing look like? What does off-road racing look like? Like, how does any of this start to change? And then what happens from that is then we might all grow from where we're at right now and just be a little bit better. And then again, then we might actually be headed towards something that we're being proactive for versus kind of like reactive trying to catch up, which is what we were, which is why the 450 is what it is now, was just trying to catch up. And we're like, that's worse. And then some of the people are like, 450s are too much. Well, we're here now.
Yeah, I agree with you in terms of you want people to be stoked on riding dirt bikes, right? You want them to have a great experience, but you also have to keep riding areas open and all that. You look at Europe, they have their FIM spec. It's like basically a DOT tire. The lug height is, I think it's 13 millimeters. It's really small,
Really small.
So they don't tear up the ground that much. Like you see, like you go to McMahon's in Smithville for the race, there's tear offs everywhere. Right. And then afterwards, you see their fields and they're just full of that stuff. That's not good. So there's situations like this when you observe and you're like, oh man. But then you watch the MXGPs, and I think it was Sewer or somebody had the line on his helmet. When he pulls a tear off, the tear off stays on his helmet. Like, to me, this is goofy and crazy, but maybe there's some benefit there. And a lot of the guys use roll offs too, because at FIM, I think it's illegal to use tear offs now in certain series.
Yeah, because now it's littering. Like, and it is. It's littering. It is. And I don't mean that to sound like a jerk. It just is, right? And that's like, it's just as bad as leaving your beer can out on the track. You know what I mean? Like, kind of a thing.
Well, you just hope you can come back, right? Yeah.
Yes. Pick it up later. But it's like, that's just
like you just hope you can come back to the facility next time. Like, if the dude gets all bummed because the place is trash, like with beer cans or tear offs or whatever, then we have one less place to ride,
Yeah.
So I don't know.
It's a weird thing, and I'm not trying to say that like everything's wrong by any means. It's just I just like kind of
No.
like to think about the other side of the coin. You know what I mean? And it's like, but
Yeah.
why don't we have biodegradable tear-offs?
No, because they're not clear. I've seen them before.
Oh
The
no, I have
vision's
no idea.
horrible.
You know, okay,
Yeah.
no, okay. So it's
No,
been
but
tried.
yeah, I think about this stuff too. Like I love to ride. I want to keep riding. It's my favorite thing ever to do. Like that's what keeps me ticking. So I'm the same way as you. And I don't know. I've observed this with tires or tear offs, or like all these little things here and there. But it's funny to me with you with the 450.
Maybe the real reason is because I just am scared to death of them, and I'm just trying to just push my fear onto the rest of the world. That's probably what it really is.
Does
Let's
Sherco
be
not
honest.
have a good 450 or what? Like
Oh
what's
no,
going on here?
that's actually what turned me on to Sherco's. Was I rode a
Oh,
2017 450 in Colorado, and it was
yeah.
lighter and more awesome than my 350 that I was on my KTM, and I was like, I'm getting a Sherco. And it's
Yeah.
that I went home and bought because I was ready to be on a two-stroke again, and so that's like when I got my 18 Sherco, and still trying to keep the Shercants alive these days.
Hey, okay, yeah. I thought it was you that I saw on the Sherco, but I think it was Morgan from Highland Cycles in Utah in the dunes.
Oh, that's his blue bike. So
Yeah, what is that thing?
He has a KTM with a bunch of blue plastic on it. It does. It
Ah,
looks like he's like on a Sherco or a YZ when the
yes.
sun hits it right or something. Yeah. I think the same thing now too. We'll have to make fun of him. Be like, dude, your YZ or what? Your Wyco. We'll call it a Wyco. Your
Yeah.
Wyco's the wrong color.
Huh. Yeah.
Well, dude, I kept you for the hour that I said I was going to keep you for, but I have to ask, what did I forget, right? Like, is there anything that Andrew Short needs to get out to the world, or it's just like a different opinion, or just, I mean, maybe you just have a tagline that you just leave every podcast with. I don't know.
No, I'm in a super weird place in my life because I love dirt bikes, and I don't want to say it's everything to me because my family faith, everything, all those things is obviously important and has value in my life. But it's the first time in my life I've been able to ride dirt bikes, and I don't know what that future looks like. So this has been really difficult for me to wrap my head around, and I don't know what life is going to be like if I don't ride, so that's weird. Thankfully, my son is into dirt bikes, so I've been working on them in the garage, but it's been a weird time for me in life, just in general, with this situation. So trying to make the most of it, and super stoked to talk to you. Anytime I can talk to people about dirt bikes, I'm all about it. And yeah, I feel like, I don't know, maybe I didn't have a lot to add or a lot to pass on, but I hope that people are stoked, can pass that passion along. And if there's any time I can help, or if they see me at the track or at an event, I'd love to help out and keep that stoke going.
Careful, man. They now know you're working on a KTM 65, so they're going to start asking you questions. Or he's on an 85 now. Yeah. So you're going to be getting a lot of like, okay, so he knows about 50s, he knows about 65s, he knows about 85s. Like, blah, 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 like you're about to start getting too many questions at the track.
Yeah.
That's all right. It's all part of it. Hey, I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much, man. You are in a different spot right now, but just stay listening, right? Like the thing, I think this is going to teach you something. Like you are going to learn something here that you weren't able to learn before, right? There's a growth here that's happening that's going to come from this, and it's probably something unexpected, but don't miss it, right? Like realize, like, so really be in a listening state throughout all of this healing process, because I have a feeling that like with me with my arthritis, that all the things I went through in different parts of my life, like I've come out the other side in such a different space. But it's because during that time that I was like healing, like it wasn't just a physical healing, like it was a mental healing, it was an emotional healing, it was a spiritual healing. And so, good luck, because and I don't say good luck that I think you're going to come out of this in a bad spot. Like good luck in the sense that like, I think it's going to kick ass, and I think you're going to learn some really cool shit about yourself.
I appreciate that. And I know there's some truth to that. So yeah, I know there's lots to be thankful for too. And I know there's people that haven't had the same outcome, and that they've soldiered through, and they continue to do that day by day. So I have a lot to be thankful for. I got to remind myself of that. And make the most of the situation. Doors open, doors close, and make the most of the situation, like what you said. So thank you.
Bitchin', you got it, man.
What was your favorite part about that episode? Mine was when I got called out for apparently not liking 450s. I'm not going to lie. I freaked out a little bit there. If you guys enjoy the content we create, please check out our YouTube channel. We've got quite a few new videos out there. If you are not subscribed on YouTube, go look for it. Seat Time, same logo. Super easy to find. If you want to support us, please hit the share button. Send it to your riding buddies so they can enjoy this on the drive to the trailhead. So you can support us financially. Shop.seattime.co to grab any of the shirts that we have there. I hope you guys enjoyed getting Seat Time. We'll see you next month for the May episode.